The Stamina Nightblade is going through some changes in this latest patch for the Elder Scrolls Online, but it's still one of the strongest builds you can play in the game for both solo and group content. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. HTM here, and it's time to update one of the strongest builds for the Elder Scrolls Online, and that is the 1-bar solo Stamina Nightblade, known as the Brawler build. I've got a ton of changes to talk about here with this one, including changes to skills, changes to skill lines, plus how to use scribing to make this build even stronger. So let's get right into it. All right, everybody, here we are back on the Stamina Nightblade, and time to update one of the easiest builds on the channel. That, of course, is the 1-bar Stamina Nightblade. Some pretty interesting changes in Update 43 in terms of Nightblade skills and skill trees, so we'll talk about that too to see how this build has changed, but very powerful and very easy to play, as I said. So let's go ahead and jump into the buff stats first. All we really need is a potion to buff some of our recoveries, and take a look at our stat sheet here. Sitting at about 16k max magicka, 23k max health, and 30k max stamina, so good resources overall. 2200 stam recovery is really good. Great weapon and spell damage. Crit chance will be over 60% as well, and some good penetration and resistances. So great stats overall. Of course, you will want to put 64 points into stamina, this being a stamina-focused Nightblade. In terms of our food and drink, Mundus Stone, as usual, we're going to be using the Thief Mundus just to boost that crit chance as high as possible. We do have a lot of other buffs here, which we'll talk about in just a minute, where all those come from. But in terms of consumables, the Lava Foot Soup is going to be great for, your buff food here. This gives you a ton of max stamina and stamina recovery. Now, if you do want more max health, you could do a max health food here as well. Something like Dubious Cameron Throne would be completely fine. You'll get a little bit less stamina and recovery, but you'll get a lot more health. So you can kind of play around with those two options, whichever you feel works best for you. In terms of potions, I do have just a Tri-Stat potion equipped right now. You can make use of a basic stamina potion. That's completely fine. The Magicka Sustain on this build is really nice. You don't really need the Tri-Stat potion there. And in terms of the race choice, I do like Khajiit on this build still, especially if you're going with the more solo-focused approach. That's because you basically get just tons of really nice stats. You get bonus recoveries, bonus max resources, and of course your critical damage and critical healing is boosted by 12%, which is a really nice buff. So yeah, I do like Khajiit on this build for more of an overall solo style of gameplay. If you want to be more offensive focused, something like Orc, Dark Elf, that would be great for the extra weapon and spell damage. If you want to be more defensive, something like Nord would be an amazing choice as well. But I think that covers all the basics, so we can jump right into the gear sets next. And not a lot has changed here. I am still enjoying the Hexos Ward set for this solo build. It just gives you the strongest, damage shield set in the game. Still gives you such a massive damage shield. 14k shield every 6 or 7 seconds. It's really, really good. I mean, it's hard to beat that, honestly. So running this, 5 pieces on the body, it is a medium armor set, so it works well on the stamina build. Gives you the bonus crit chance, weapon, and spell damage. So yeah, I cannot complain about this set. Definitely recommend you pick it up if you haven't already. And like I said, just 5 pieces on the body is going to be the ideal way to run this. We've got the helmet, we've got the shoulders, hands, legs, and feet. All divines there, all max stamina in chance. And the second 5-piece set will really depend on how you want to play this build. Are you focused more on survivability, and damage shield, that whole damage shield playstyle? Then I still recommend this set called Prayer Shawl. It is a base game set. This is actually a light armor dungeon set, so it kind of feels strange to run on a Stamina Nightblade. But if you run this with, weapons and jewelry, you can run 1 light armor piece on the body. It still stacks up pretty well. And check out the 5-piece bonus here, really interesting. When you overheal yourself or an ally, you grant them a damage shield. Absorbs about 6k damage for 6 seconds, but this effect can occur once every 2 seconds. So this is effectively like the fastest damage shield cooldown in the game, and you can refresh this up to every 2 seconds. We have plenty of passive healing on this build. You'll see why in a couple minutes when I get to the skills. And so you can effectively have this up 100% of the time, stacked with, of course, your damage shield from Hexos Ward. So those do stack together and you'll have, 20k plus damage shield before we even talk about damage shield skills. But yeah, the ideal way to do this, if you are going to run this set, definitely want a two-handed weapon. That really is ideal for a solo build. In case you didn't know why, that actually comes down to the two-handed passives. When you look at heavy weapons, maces increase your offensive penetration by about 3,000, so that's a really good passive effect there. So yeah, that'll give us 2 bonuses because it is a two-handed weapon. Then, like I said, 2 pieces of jewelry, so a prayer shawl ring and necklace. That'll give you up to 4. And then just 1 piece on the body. I prefer to run the waist because that's the sort of the smallest armor piece. You're going to lose the least amount of armor by running that in light. And then if you missed it, this is precise with the stamina absorb enchant. Waist would be divines with the max stamina enchant. And then our jewelry, I did bloodthirsty here. I did trait change these because by default, the trait here will be arcane. So you'll get, a bunch of extra max magicka that you don't really need. So I do recommend you trait change this to something like bloodthirsty, robust, or infused. But you could probably tell that since I'm focused on the 1-bar playstyle for this build, I am going to make use of the Oakensoul Ring Mythic. This just gives us so many buffs for the 1-bar playstyle that it's hard to not use this. Tons of buffs: minor berserk, minor courage, major brutality and sorcery, major prophecy, major savagery, pretty much everything we need. And especially major resolve, which is going to be a little bit harder to get on the Nightblade this patch. The fact that you can get major resolve for free with the Oakensoul Ring is actually huge. So yeah, definitely pick this up if you don't have it yet. You can check the website in the written guide for a quick overview of how to pick up the Oakensoul Ring. Definitely worth your time if you don't have it yet. With that being said, we just have 1 more slot left over. If you're paying attention, that's the chest. So heavy trainee chest here is going to just give you a nice max health bonus. It's going to really help with survivability on the solo setup. So yeah, heavy trainee chest there with the max health enchant for a little bit of extra armor and max health. But that is the survivability loadout, essentially. Hexo Sword, Prayer Shawl, heavy trainee chest with the Oakensoul Ring. Now, if you do want to be more damage focused, which you could completely do since this build has tons of survivability already, you can swap that Prayer Shawl set with something a little bit more offensive. One of my favorite options would be like a crafted set, like Order's Wrath, for example. That'll give you even more crit chance and crit damage. You won't get the extra damage shield, obviously, that Prayer Shawl gives you, but we have ways of getting a 3rd shield even through our skill set. So yeah, you could definitely go with a more offensive set if you want to. By the way, all those different options are going to be in the written guide. Link for that is down in the pinned comment and description, so feel free to check that out as well. But let's go over the skills next. Very simple, as I said, with the 1-bar setup, but a few things have changed for the Nightblade, so this is something that you're going to want to keep in mind. So let's go through skill by skill and see what's different here. So starting with Killer's Blade, this is just our execute skill. And you'll notice the big change here is it's no longer the 1st skill in the assassination skill line, it's now the 3rd skill. And that is because they moved the 1st skill. They moved one of those skills, specifically Blur, into the Shadow skill line. Now that's not really a big deal for us, but what it did do is it gave room for them to move Surprise Attack from the Shadow skill line into the Assassination skill line as well. Now Surprise Attack has basically been the main, spammable skill on this build for a long time, and so there are some things that you need to think about in terms of your build on the Nightblade if you do focus on Surprise Attack as your main damage source. One of those things, like I said, is you no longer are going to get passive armor from using Surprise Attack. And what I mean by that is you had this Shadow Barrier passive in the Shadow skill line. Basically, when you cast a Shadow ability, you would get Major Resolve. They did increase the duration of Major Resolve, but basically, we're not casting a Shadow ability anymore. So this does have an effect on 1-bar builds where you have less bar space. I didn't really have room, to use a Shadow ability, so that's just something to keep in mind. Now, the fact that I'm using Oakensoul Ring really solves that problem, and so it's not an issue for this build at all, but that is something to think about. If you're not using Oakensoul Ring, and you are doing like a simple 1-bar setup, you will want to slot some type of Shadow ability there to make sure that you maintain that Major Resolve buff, because you're not going to get it from Surprise Attack anymore. Just something to keep in mind there. But really, for this build, it just made it a lot easier. We've got Killer's Blade, like I said, which is our execute skill. This is still great. It does massive damage, heals you back if the enemy dies within 2 seconds. Very cheap to cast, so yeah, this thing is amazing. We've got Surprise Attack for our main spammable DPS skill. This can set enemies off balance. It's guaranteed crit strikes up to every 3 seconds. This does get some nice interactions now from the Assassination skill line. Specifically, pressure points, you'll get a little bit of extra bonus weapon and spell crit chance because you have basically an extra Assassination skill slotted here. Speaking of which, we have tons of those. We have another one, Merciless Resolve. That's going to be our main burst damage skill and also a burst heal, as long as we are within melee range. So huge tooltip on this for both the damage and the heals. You can also just stack it up to get more passive weapon and spell damage. 60 per stack up to 5 times, so about 300 bonus weapon and spell damage is no joke. Now, you might be wondering about, the morph that I'm using. Why am I doing Magicka instead of the stamina morph? Well, Magicka just helps a little bit with your sustain. So if you do, every single skill on your bar as a stamina skill, that's obviously going to drain a lot more stamina, and you're going to, your magic is going to be useless. Whereas if you put a couple, 1 or 2 Magicka skills on your skill bar, especially for a 1-bar build, that's really going to spread out the resource drain, and it's going to make sustain so much easier. So yeah, for the solo setup, if you are, just taking care of yourself, basically, switch this over to Magicka. I think you're going to have much better sustain, and the overall result is about the same. Speaking of assassination skills, we got one more. Of course, the ultimate here, In-Cap Strike, is going to be very good for dealing damage, causing enemies to take 20% more damage from you for 8 seconds. That can even extend up to 12 seconds if you have 120 ultimate or more. So it is kind of useful to stack your ultimate up, especially against bosses at the start of a fight. Really nice to burn those bosses down. And then one more skill here we should talk about is Swallow Soul. This comes from the Siphoning skill line. So what this does is it gives you a nice sort of alternate DPS skill. So if you do start to run low on stamina from spamming Surprise Attack, you can always spam Swallow Soul instead. It's slightly less damage. The nice thing about this is it costs Magicka, so it's going to help, spread those resources even more. And it gives you a very powerful heal over time effect. So 40% of the damage you do is going to convert to a burst heal that heals you at once every 2 seconds for 10 seconds. So basically a very strong heal over time. Think of like Cauterize for the Dragon Knight, but even better because this ticks every 2 seconds and these heals are strong. This is the thing about the Nightblade, right? Is that the damage that you do, basically the more damage you do, the stronger your heals become. So something you should think about, in terms of the rotation, which we'll go over in a minute, is you want to hit your In-Cap Strike first to give you that 20% more damage against the target, and then hit them with Swallow Soul, right? Because that damage, and specifically that healing, is going to be 20% higher. Same thing with Merciless Resolve. You're going to get a stronger heal and damage tick off of that if you do your ultimate first. So that's just something to keep in mind. But yeah, these are basically, my damage skills. Now, the one thing that I did really look into changing for this build was this final skill, which is our damage shield. Right now, I have used in the past the Brawler skill here from the two-handed skill line. That is still quite good. Gives you a strong damage shield, and obviously this scales up. The more enemies you hit, the stronger the shield becomes. But now with scribing and the new Gold Road chapter, you have some stronger options, I think, for damage shields if you want to play around with scribing. And so one of those I found was using the Smash skill, also from the two-handed skill line. And you can convert this to a damage shield skill, which is really interesting. So check out, first of all, the tooltip on this. Smash, when you do the first script as a damage shield, gives you 12,000 shield size for 6 seconds. So that's basically, double the size of the shield you get from Brawler. That is really awesome. You can also do other scripts like passive healing, right? So I have a 10-second heal over time. And you can also apply some major and minor buffs for yourself. I've got minor vitality. So that's going to increase my healing received and my damage shield strength by 6%. So yeah, when you look at that and then you compare it to Carve, Brawler, I mean, there are some pretty big differences here. Obviously, the damage shield is much higher with Smash, and then you get the heal over time and the minor vitality buff if you have access to these scripts. Cost is a bit more, that's true. But sustain, I found, really isn't an issue on this build. So what I found with this is basically if you know that you're going to just solo a boss, right? Just one boss in a fight, then the Smash ability with damage shield script makes more sense. You get a stronger shield and you get all the other bonus effects. I think that's even true if you have like a boss and 1 ad or a boss and 2 ads, it's still going to be really good. Now, where Brawler becomes better is when you have like 3, 4, 5 or more enemies in a fight, then obviously the shield for Brawler is going to increase much stronger with those extra enemies that you're hitting. It gets 50% stronger per enemy hit up to 6 different enemies. So that's basically the difference. You know, if you know that you're doing something with a lot of enemies, let's say you're grinding experience or you're trying to solo your way through a vet dungeon, maybe Infinite Archive, something with more enemies, then yeah, keep Brawler on your skill bar. It's going to be the most efficient for that particular content. If you're just soloing a world boss or a couple of enemies at a time, check out the Smash skill from scribing. Like I said, you can get a much higher shield from this, plus the bonus effects does make soloing those sort of 1 or 2 enemy encounters a lot easier. So that is the skill loadout. As I said, you can check out the written guide for all the different versions of the skills there if you need to reference that later. That being said, though, I think we can just do a basic rotation on the boss so you can see how easy this is. Now, generally, I'm going to start with Swallow Soul, right? I want to build up that heal over time, make sure that's going. I'm going to cast my damage shield to protect my health a little bit. Then I'm just going to start doing damage. So we'll go ahead and start with Swallow Soul into Smash, set the damage shield up, do a couple of surprise attacks here, and then you can see my ultimate's ready. That's where I want to go ahead and use it to empower my attacks. Do my Swallow Soul again to get that heal running. Make sure I do Merciless Resolve. Make sure I maintain that damage shield. About once every 10 seconds for the shield is all you need. And really, I'm just recasting Swallow Soul when that fades off. Using my ultimate when it's ready. Using Merciless Resolve, and then basically just surprise attack in between. Keeping the damage shield up. You can see this enemy is already almost at half health. And that was super quick. Once the enemy, though, gets down to about maybe 30, 35%, you can switch over to your execute. So that's what we'll do next. Make sure my shield is up, and then swap over to execute. You still want to use Merciless Resolve even in the execute phase for the extra heal. And just make sure you refresh Swallow Soul as well for that heal over time. There we go. Very easy. So let's talk about champion points next. Now, in terms of the green tree, this is just the basic stuff that I typically will do for any of my solo builds. So Steed's Blessing, followed by Treasure Hunter, Rationer, and then Liquid Efficiency. Those are going to be my 4 slotted green stars. Over in the blue tree, you have a lot more options. I do typically start with Fighting Finesse, just to get that extra crit damage and crit healing. That's going to stack up really nice on the Nightblade class. And then you saw that most of our damage was single target abilities, so things like Deadly Aim, for example, Master at Arms, those are going to be very effective as well. And then one option I do like, any solo build really, but especially on the Nightblade with the big direct damage hits, Reaving Blows, that gives you 8% of that damage back as a heal. So we have tons of healing already, obviously. You don't have to do it this way. You could do something like Wrathful Strikes instead, just for more raw damage. But yeah, this is going to make all of your abilities basically heal you back. So it's basically like a mini Ring of the Pale Order. That's pretty cool in terms for solo content. With the blue tree too, don't forget to go into Staving Death, pick up your passive, damage reduction stars, especially Preparation. 10% damage reduction is really, really big for only 20 points. And then in the red tree, just pretty basic. We're going to do, the usual Rejuvenation, Fortified, and Boundless Vitality for those extra bonus stats. And then since we are very, focused on damage shields on this build, Bastion is going to be a very good use of your champion points here. So 50 points there gives you 15% bonus damage shield size. And that's going to stack with everything that we have on this build. So very worthwhile picking that one up for your 4th star as well. If you're curious about the outfit style on this particular build, I'm mixing a couple different styles here. For head and a lot of the body pieces, that's going to be the Sword Thane style. And then for shoulder, this is Deadlands Gladiator. All right, everybody, with that said, that's going to wrap up this build update for the solo 1-bar Stamina Nightblade. Hope you guys found this useful. And if you did, don't forget to do me a favor, crush that like button. It absolutely helps the channel and lets YouTube know to share this video with others. Don't forget, I do have a full written guide that goes along with this build as well, so if you want to look at that to get more options for skills, gear sets, plus a full champion point breakdown for 300, 600, 900, and 1200 CP, make sure to check that out. I will leave a link down in the comments and the description below. But as always, thanks for watching. I hope you're doing well. Stay safe out there, and I will see you around in the next video.